Most of you probably can't relate, and you don't realize just how disheartening and frustrating, purposely frustrating it is, putting time and energy into trying to help people and having it go fucking nowhere online because I am systematically censored. And it's because I'm talking about shit that reflects reality in stark contrast to what you're going to find online. But most people haven't figured that out. People do this in almost every situation imaginable. In social situations where people are speaking about a subject they do not understand, they mislead people by extension. And these are the things that are typically speaking, especially based on, our modern world, subject to the algorithm, patently fascist horse shit, and all of these are inclusive. What people consider quote unquote reach in today's, jargon, slang or terminology, if you will. If people looked into things before they bought into things, they would speak about things without corrupting the information. They would speak about subjects across the board and what they would talk about, what they would relate to the general masses, the public sphere, the John Q. public. It would be untainted. It would reflect reality. But people don't understand how important it is to appreciate that words have power. And words have power in a number of ways people don't grasp, apparently. Again, because people are not looking into things, they're buying into things. And it's a fucking issue. So let's play this. It's pretty short. And then I'll rattle something else off. And let's see if you can pick up on what I'm getting at. And then another bit in here I'm not going to rattle off because I'm not going to just think for you. But it is a deeper esoteric thread or route to reality. It's something people should have been able to figure out, but they're using our masters' corrupted outlines, which is why they don't understand it.
Consul wants to know, God, on behalf of a new listener with me, they ask, if God can do anything, why not just eradicate sin and give up his only son?
That's ridiculous when we start talking about giving up his only son. The only son that he's given us is the son above us. The son that is above us is the son of God. That is the one that resurrects after December 21st, stays in the southern quadrant of our flattened earth for 3 days, and then rises when the so-called Virgo. When Virgo is rising on the third day, that's when we talk about the sun being born of the Virgin. Everything is based upon astrotheology. They anthropomorphized it and started putting white people to the information that was actually based upon forces that are understood and we understood. If the ancestors were to come back and see the way we took the knowledge that they put down in story form and we literalized it, they would have been laughing at us. They would have thought we were fools. Because everything in that Bible is supposed to be about science.
Do you see the happy little sun symbol in there? That little sigil? That we don't need in there to think in terms of the sun, if you're capable of, using your imagination. Picturing things in your mind's eye, which a lot of people stress these days. Ironically, usually it's the same kids who will wax poetic about a third eye. But they use emojis, which are social engineering stickers, in place to do away with abstract thought. This is one of the many ways that our masters have cooked up a system, which is a war on words, by all rights, a corruption of language. Can you fill in the rest? You probably can't. It's not a good thing, but most people have bought into it. So, what I should say to kick some of this off, it's all in the wording to begin with. This guy's going to tell you to buy into a planet, to repeat planets, to think in terms of planets. Planets do not exist. They never did. They never will. And that will probably jar some people, and some people will probably just default to another one of our masters' agendas, another outline. Oh, it's because it's the holographic universe, isn't it? Oh, it's because it's simulation theory, isn't it? No, that's not at all what I'm referring to. It's because they were always wandering stars. Now, this is when other people out there who refuse to think for themselves and appreciate what I just said will also assume, well, isn't it the same thing? yeah, planets does relate back to wandering stars. It's a deeper root. And what has become quote-unquote planets is, and by all rights always was, a fucking corruption of reality. A corruption of what does and does not reflect reality. Now, most of you with no attention span whatsoever have probably tuned out and or assumed that I'm not going to teach you something. And in many ways, I'm not going to spoon feed you things. And this is when I'm also trying to see people to the fucking door. But with that in mind, the things that I'm going to rattle off will jar you. They should jar you. They might spur you to be able to figure things out on your own. Again, if you can use the brain between your ears, which most people can't. Now, I've offended people out there. Ooh, more people will run for the fucking hills, block me, and or dash straight into their feed where they're spoon-fed a slush pile of superficial propaganda in place to fuck you and I up, which is why people like this repeat shit like this. So, if you think about planets, you're probably thinking about a bullshit outline. You're either thinking about the globe theory or you're thinking about the flat earth theory. And I do mean theory. There's a pseudo-intellectual outline that was spoon-fed to the masses first. That was the flat earth. Keep in mind, in none of the, you could think of in terms of social, social control. Essentially, what people dress up as religion. None of those texts state flat earth. Not one of them states flat earth. This is like trying to find proof of the rapture. It's a man-made bullshit agenda. And most people will repeat it these days. So you either bought into that or you bought into the globe theory because learning against learning was a campaign most people are blissfully unaware of. It's where our masters went from every town, village, city, fill in the blank, and they sent their self-appointed quote-unquote astronomers to re-educate the nitwits. They taught people, they trained people to repeat shit that does not reflect reality. And this cut two different ways. They were selling people the flat earth. And then they were selling people the globe theory. And the way our masters work is they resurface, they rebrand and or they recirculate the same shit that worked before. Which is why we got a reemergence of the flat earth recently. In modern times, relatively recently. But people aren't too bright, so they buy into it. And because people bought into it, now we got an even more disconnected bullshit outline. I'm stressing all this because this is shit you guys need to think about and think in terms of and scrutinize, but people aren't. And that's what you see in the public sphere, is people not thinking for themselves by and large. So 2017, roughly, a CIA-sanctioned narrative was kicked out, and that's where you got all the disconnected domes that people are talking about, and they're saying that's what's what. If you just read the names of all of these disconnected domes, it should insult you, because it's a joke. To drive that point home, it's the same narrative as a bunch of disconnected galaxies. You know, the peanut butter planet, the weed planet. That stuff's supposed to insult you so that you think for yourself and you realize that it's also a consent-based system, which means our masters are laughing at us and they are telling you it's a joke. And you're the punchline if you're repeating it. So in the flat earth now you got Cleopatra's Peninsula and you got a Anunnaki Island. It's the same fucking joke. But people repeat it. So what this guy's rattled off in here, if you're thinking in terms of either of those, you do not understand these things, which is why people will also repeat this. Also take to heart. The most superficial thing you could do, ironically, under the quote-unquote sun, yeah, is relegate people or polarize a group of people. Or groups of people. Plural. In this case, if you listen maybe 3/4 of the way through here, they're going to call attention to somebody with less melanin in their skin. That's a problem. Anybody who does this is the problem. And you would know this if you looked into things, but people do not know what reflects reality because you and I are not supposed to, and most people aren't willing to think about it. Yeah? So here's another tidbit here. So we're talking about the sun. He's talking about the sun in the fucking sky. If you understood wandering stars to begin with, and I've never found this in a book, I don't know anybody who knows this, to be honest. You don't see these things in the public sphere because you're not supposed to understand it. For the most part, our masters ran all over our realm, which most people misattribute to the world. It's just a piece of the puzzle, where we are, and they destroyed monuments, they spirited away relics, They quite literally destroyed things and erased what reflected reality. And this is how they began this great game, this long game that our masters have been playing. And this dates back to the 16th century, approximately. People would know this if they looked into it, if they weren't confusing entertainment with research, but that's what people are doing these days. Another example, since I mentioned the Rapture, if you look into the Rapture, I forgot the gal's name. Her name's something McDonald, I think it was. That dates back to maybe the 1800s, roughly. That's when the Rapture was cooked up. And it was based on a vision a girl had. And initially they outright said, yeah, this is demonic. She's hanging out with fucking demons. This is a bullshit outline. Nobody should repeat it. But a reverend or one of these assholes, a pastor, he bought into it, started shopping it around because it sounded good, and people latched onto it. They liked that. And now it's a thing. Now there's even 2 stages of the fucking Rapture, where people want to be put in a trebuchet and launched at the fucking moon. It's ridiculous, but people repeat it. The same goes for everything under the sun, literally. And above, having to do with, quote unquote, the Nazis who founded NASA. Also take to heart, the fact that America conscripted Nazis at the end of World War II is a testament we no longer have a constitution to worry about. But most people will tell you that you're free and that voting matters. People don't know much, if anything. And what they're speaking to is just fucking you and I up. So back to the sun. It cracks me up in these circles. You'll have kids who will wax poetic about the NASA version of Nibiru. Then you'll have the flat earth version of that, which is where people will wax poetic about the fucking black sun. And then they'll tell you that Jesus is the sun. Again, the words that are coming out of my mouth are lesser magic. I am telling you something. I'm throwing you a bone. I'm giving you stepping stones if you are capable and or willing to use the gray matter between your ears. That's why it's there. And it's not going to come to you easily. It's not going to come to you naturally. You're going to have to chip away at it. And what you're going to really need to do is kick all of the fucking paradigms to the goddamn curb. And if you don't do that and you don't build these things up for yourself, you're going to constantly corrupt the information and you're never going to make any progress. And that's what we see online. Because people aren't willing to think for themselves by and large. Not exclusively. For some reason, they think they need a crutch to lean on, and they don't. They're full of potential, but they're squandering it, which is to say they're unwilling to think for themselves and choose that adventure. And that's what I urge you to do today. In the video I just showed you, I guess you don't have to stare at this. What else should I make you look at? Doesn't really matter. They were talking about why doesn't God get rid of sin? Why wouldn't that be a thing? If you think about where you and I are, this system, this is a good one to pause on. Where we're at, right? It's a passion play. There's a reason why there's a good and a bad, a cold and a hot. Oh, I should have said it the other way around. Night and a day, female and male, etc., etc. Without that what? Can you fill in the blank? You were told about this shit, mind you, in terms of lesser magic, embedded in, which one is it? I think it's the Matrix Reloaded, I think it's the one where I can't remember if it's the architect or if it's the Frenchman. It might have been the architect. Either way. And it touches on what people would probably consider the Nightmare Matrix and the previous incarnations of the Matrix, and why people would reject it. It's loosely mentioned in the first one. In other words, without some sort of adversity, without some sort of constant change, things aren't propelled forward. The same applies to numerous aspects of what we consider quote-unquote reality. If you use your brain, you eat food, it turns to shit. It's nice going in, but it's not always great coming out, but there is relief, and the cycle repeats. It's a very crude example, but it is how things work. And without that, there's no purpose, in other words. Same reason there's roughly 3 stages of what we consider life, and there's more beyond that, of course, but there's 3 that we usually think of in terms of life. And you'll see numerous examples of that with God, I can't think of the Freemasonic crap or the esoteric way they usually dress it up with beauty and something else, or mercy and what have you in terms of the pillars. But you got birth, you got life, and you got death. From the womb to the tomb, or from the tomb to the womb, because things also act retro. What was it? Retrocausality is part of this in a big way, but people don't understand that. In other words, the end sings to begin, or the beginning is the end, and the end is the beginning. That's how shit works. The red sings to the blue, and the blue sings to the red. But everywhere you go, you're going to be polarized. You're going to be told to choose one side as if it was a fucking football game, and it's not. That's not how things work. And anybody that chooses to think for themselves would recognize that fact. And then it's up to you to call bullshit when you're told, sold, and urged to repeat bullshit. Absolute nonsense. Again, remember there's a mention of lighter skin in the video. No one needs to do that. You don't need to do that unless you have a fucking agenda. But as always, what the fuck do I know? Definition, diplomatic. Now, I've been leaving what people would probably say edgy or fill in the blank. I push the envelope in a lot of ways, and I'll say things most people don't really want to hear or think about. I challenge people, I have a sharp tongue, and I speak to things that reflect reality that you could figure out. They lead somewhere, they're all interconnected. It's not just wishy-washy fucking belief system-based nonsense. It's not based on what our masters are shopping around, which is why you're not familiar with it. And that's usually why people reject it, among other reasons, including my tone and demeanor and the approach. I've noticed over the years, especially with people who I know that haven't kicked me to the curb, but they're not exactly receptive to the information, but some of them still keep up with some of it. They won't click like, they won't leave a comment. Sometimes they'll watch the information and consider it, but they sure as shit wouldn't out themselves by basically putting their name on there, by hitting the little heart button or the little thumbs up or any of the other crap. Let alone would they take information that may or may not speak to them, but if it did speak to them, and repost it, because by extension, it paints a target on their back because they're shopping around the same thing suddenly that does reflect reality, goes somewhere, means something, and by all rights calls out most people you know, like, and love. Anybody you're going to bump into. It's going to challenge anything you're going to fucking find in a book, typically speaking. It's going to challenge what people repeat. Let's contrast that with what reflects reality versus what people assume they know. And most people don't do that. And it's been pretty wild doing this for 10 years and realizing that people are afraid. They're not willing to fucking challenge things. In other words, they're not saying these things anyhow because most of them don't know these things. Most of them don't appreciate them. And the list goes on. But when I put it in a crappy package, this is, my presentation style, if you want to call it that. That's a shit way to put it, but just the same. They don't recirculate this information either. Because they want to blend in. They want to be part of the crowd. It's cool maybe to pop in here and view what I'm up to. And to cherry pick what I can teach you. But heaven forbid, you also try to strive towards doing the right fucking thing. It just blows me away. It just blows me the fuck away. Keep in mind, on that note, I have told people, and some people just can't connect these dots either, not to take the information and drag it through the mud. So if you're using a bunch of paradigms, or you're going to take what I can teach you and then apply it to one of our master's paradigms, in doing so, you bend it, you corrupt it. It no longer reflects reality because you didn't think better to not do something like that. Some people have spoken with me over the years and said, "Well, you told me not to do any of that. Don't just share it and stuff." And some stuff I think I have probably said that as well. So for what it's worth, I think I have here and there. Definitely during the darker periods when I've been very frustrated, because it's It's a fucking endurance test interacting with the public. Social media or in real life. And you guys would see this, you would experience it, you would feel it to your fucking core the more you do what I've been doing, what I've urged people to do. In other words, if you pulled your head out of your ass, you started considering the information, you started working with the stepping stones, the information that I've given you guys over the years, over 10 fucking years, you will see that it's interconnected and it goes somewhere. It paints a very clear picture, and it's not what people are talking about. It's not what's being shopped around, which means that shit is shit. I've said this so many different times, oftentimes, not the greatest presentations again. But I am telling you things, I'm using my words, and I am conveying meaning. But most people don't want to hear it, reason it out, let alone embody it. Alright, anyway, maybe you got the point, maybe you didn't. Probably the latter, based on what I've been experiencing. But again, I'm a Pisces, and I got high hopes. I got fucking high hopes. So I'm still at this. Because you guys are full of potential, you're just squandering it. You could change things. Collectively, we could change things if the vast majority did have a fucking clue and they were willing to do the right thing. But presently, that is not the case. And people do not know what they're talking about, which means they don't have a foundation to stand on, and the only way to ever get through and do all of this is to challenge ourselves first by building up a foundation and figuring this shit out to begin with, getting past the superficial hurdles, after which, then when you hear somebody rattling off absolute nonsense, anytime you hear somebody talking about a fucking planet or light has speed, you say, hey, no it doesn't, and you can if you want, you can show them why, you can, in a lot of cases I don't anymore, but you can if you want. If you got it, if you figured it out. And then after that, if we had the moral majority with us instead of against us, do parallel this with Anybody Can Be an Agent in that 1999 film, The Matrix, because it's a great example of lesser magic. Most people are working against us, but if the moral majority was on our side, we could draw a fucking line in the sand. We could uproot our masters. We could abolish government, start over like adults, not anarchy. We're currently living through synarchy, but the point is not to tear this down and turn it into fucking anarchy, where everybody's going ape shit, and it doesn't turn out well for anyone. The point is to start over like adults, yes, with a system for the people, by the people, as it was intended here in the States. Even though the Republic fell during the Civil War and was finalized in 1871, meaning it's not for the people, by the people, and most people don't know that. These are, again, just some superficial threads that I often rattle off. Most people probably don't even look into, but they probably should, and they would if they were invested, which means they're involved, which means they're trying, they're actively striving not to be part of the problem. They're looking for a solution and how to help others. All right, now I'll fuck off.